If there's one day we can generally remember, it's our own birthday. Friends and relatives may occasionally forget, but we don't. The government even thinks it's important enough to keep an official record of it. But how would you feel if I arrived at your house one day and announced that I had decided to change your birthday? You probably wouldn't be impressed, particularly if the only reason I could give you was that I simply liked it better on a different day. Yet that's what humans have tried to do to God. God's authority has been under challenge from the beginning of human existence. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve listened to the devil's deception and decided to eat of the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil. At the time of the Exodus, when the 10 plagues fell upon the Egyptians, God instructed the Israelites to place lamb's blood on their doorposts to avoid the angel of death. Some no doubt argued, what is there about lamb's blood that will keep death away? What difference will it make whether we put the mark on the door or not? Like Adam and Eve, the difference in their case was life or death. A further illustration comes from Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. It concerns an image that was erected on the plain of Dura. Those who refused to bow down and worship it were to be thrown into the flames of the fiery furnace. It tells of 3 Hebrews who, rather than bow down and compromise their allegiance to God, chose the possibility of being burnt alive. Interestingly enough, what happened to those 3 Hebrews in ancient Babylon translates rather neatly to events that will occur during the last days. Revelation 13 sets the scene.
He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
Under the threat of death, this future power will attempt to force all to worship an image, just like Nebuchadnezzar of old. But that's not all. After a series of signs and miracles that help convince people to worship the image, an economic boycott will be brought against those who refuse to worship this image.
And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name.
All of this sounds a bit like a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? Just what is this beast that the apocalypse speaks about? And what is the mark of the beast that seems to be so important? In order to understand these critical issues, we need to go back to the beginning of Revelation chapter 13.
At the same time as a decree is given to worship the image of the beast, God sends a message into all the world that calls people to worship him.
Saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water."
The issue in the last days is the same as in Nebuchadnezzar's day. Worship. Who we worship, how we worship, and when we worship. And obedience to all of God's commandments is going to be the key evidence of our allegiance, just as it has been since Adam and Eve.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority.
Now, you'll remember that when Bible prophecy refers to a beast, it's not a person, but a power. We're not dealing with individual personalities here. When the Bible spoke of the lion, it represented Babylon, the bear, Medo-Persia, and the leopard, Greece. They were all political powers or kingdoms. So when the Bible speaks about this beast power, it's a religio-political system that grew out of Rome. The Bible gives us 7 clues as to its identification. It arises out of the sea. It is a religious power. It blasphemes. It persecutes. It rules for 42 prophetic months. It receives a deadly wound. His number is 666. Which power in history qualifies? Well, a closer look at the details may help us. The first clue in that its seat of authority was to be in Rome.
The ideal of the whole Europe ruled from one place survived. but who, more than anybody else, symbolized and did in fact enjoy this unified leadership. If any one person did, it was most certainly the Pope of Rome. The Roman Catholic Church is his successor to the Roman Empire. There's no question about that.
And it was granted to him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and he was given authority over every tribe, tongue, and nation.
Considering the extent of its authority, it's difficult to go beyond the dominance of the Church of the Middle Ages when looking for an identifiable superpower arising after the fall of the Roman Empire.
And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies.
Some believe that the beast must be pagan and atheistic because it speaks blasphemies. After all, how could a religious system actually do what the prophecy says it will do?
Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven.
Blasphemy is not a word used by civil governments. It refers to those who take God's name in vain or who actually claim to be God. That's why the Jews charged Jesus with blasphemy. So a power impersonating God, assuming his titles of office, or presuming to exercise the special privileges of God alone would qualify as a blasphemous one. But there's another clear definition of blasphemy found in Luke 5:21.
The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?"
For Jesus to claim to forgive sin, yet not be God, would clearly have been a blasphemy. So for any human who claims to absolve or forgive sin. Another characteristic of the beast's power would be its claim to be able to forgive sin. But there are further identifying points.
And it was granted to him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and he was given authority over every tribe, tongue, and nation.
This is similar to a statement in Daniel 7 that talks about the little horn power making war against the saints and prevailing against them. Unfortunately, history tells a tragic story of religious persecution carried out by the medieval church.
The Inquisition was begun by the Pope when he realized that preaching and campaigns did not work. So he started a crusade first, and then the Inquisition with full power to investigate anybody who could be a heretic. And it spread terror in the whole of Europe over the years. It was a terrible thing.
Anyone who wanted to follow the Bible rather than human tradition was forced to live dangerously, and it's estimated that millions lost their lives.
And so there's always the danger that the church applies to the state. And when the church has control, it feels that we must use the state in order to prevent people losing their souls and other people's souls by persecuting them. They must believe the right things.
A fifth clue is a mathematical prediction concerning a certain period of duration.
And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months.
The beast power would reign for some 42 months. Do you remember the prophetic formula?
Quite frequently in the Old Testament, there's an equivalency between days and years. And as you work with Bible prophecy, it seems to make sense that this period of 1260 actually refers to 1,260 years of dominance by a religious power. And there's only one point in history where this could possibly fit, and that would be the Middle Ages.
Another clue is found in Revelation 13:3.
I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast.
All the clues we're studying here would be of little consequence to us today if the medieval church had remained dead and passed out of existence. But the Bible predicted it would be healed. Following the end of the period of church dominance, the Pope was arrested, dethroned and sent into captivity during the French Revolution, where he died in the French city of Valence. But God said this power would be restored as the seemingly deadly wound slowly healed. It then says that all the world wondered after the beast. But what is this beast's identifiable mark? Revelation 13:18 says,
Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
In the Bible, the number 7 represents perfection, completeness, or fullness. On the other hand, the number 6 is the opposite. It stands for imperfection, humanness, and incompleteness. The number 6 stands for rebellion rather than obedience. A 666, therefore, symbolises the triple union of error, the union of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, a very powerful confederacy led by this counterfeit religious system.
It just seems that as we examine all 7 of these clues, that it starts to look as though the church that began in Rome and dominated Europe for so long is probably the power outlined here in Revelation 13. So far we have identified the beast power, but what is the mark of this beast? Who receives it? And has anyone got it now?
Revelation talks of 2 marks. While one group of people receive the mark of the beast, the other receive the mark or seal of God. In order to understand the mark of the beast, we need also to understand God's seal.
Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who'd been given power to harm the land and the sea, "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God."
The seal is placed on people's foreheads. Psychologists who map the human brain tell us that the frontal lobe of the cerebrum, the forehead, is the place where functions of the will and judgment are located. So the forehead signifies the mind's power to choose, and here we are asked to make a critical choice. On the other hand, the mark of the beast is not only on the forehead, but in the hand.
Then a 3rd angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or his hand."
One of the old Hebrew prophets, Ezekiel, had a vision. Ezekiel lived back in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. He lived at the same time as Daniel. And he saw a vision of the people left behind in Jerusalem after Nebuchadnezzar cleaned the city out, left just a few people behind. And in his vision, he saw an angel with an ink pen going through the city and placing a mark on the forehead of those who were still loyal to God in that ancient setting. I think John, as he tried to find the words to describe his own visions, was probably able to remember Ezekiel's description. And so he refers to that mark on the forehead, and then also refers to a mark on the hand, probably to indicate loyalty begins in the mind, but it eventually is worked out in what we do, the practical things that we do, the way we live our lives.
Now, archaeology has made some very interesting advances in the last few decades, and one of those is the discovery of ancient contract tablets, or so-called covenant tablets. And in these tablets, you have agreements being made between one nation and another, between individuals buying property, getting married, and so forth. It's pretty normal type stuff that we would recognize today. But crucial to those contract tablets, much as would be the case today, is the need to identify the individual who's making the contract, identify his realm of authority, and so forth. And so right at the center of each of these covenant tablets, you find such an identifying mark.
In Bible times, a seal was a device having a raised design like a signet ring that could be stamped into clay or wax and leave an impression on documents, something like an official signature does today. So the sealing or signing of a document authenticates it. An official seal always contained 3 elements: the name of the official, their office or title, the territory over which they ruled.
10 Commandments in Exodus 20, and they are in the exact same form as ancient contract tablets. In the exact center of these 10 Commandments, you'll find the Sabbath commandment, where God is identified as the creator of heaven and earth, and therefore the one that is worthy of worship.
If you look at the following commands, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, you might well ask the question, says who? It's not until you get to the fourth command that you find the three elements of the seal of authority of the God who is asking us to do some things and not others.
Now, one of the commandments, one of the 10, which has been especially seen as a test of loyalty, is the fourth commandment. What does the fourth commandment say? It starts with the words, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." And emperors had their holy days. And the official Roman state religion had its holy days. And community members were expected to participate and to take part in the celebrations on the holy day. Otherwise, loyalty would be questioned. So here were the Christians, because Jesus had asked them to show loyalty by keeping God's commandments, and commandment keeping included worshiping on the seventh day of the week. So here were the Christians off by themselves in little places trying to worship quietly on the seventh day of the week, which for their neighbors was not a special holy day. So that singled them out. And Revelation develops a theme of a last day challenge along the same line, when religion and politics will be put together.
You may remember that in Daniel 7:25, it states how the little horn would think to change times and laws. The mark of the beast has to do with his authority. Now, if a person or system or church thinks it's able to change God's law, it must by definition exalt itself higher than the God who made the laws in the first place. So this whole issue over the attempted change of God's law is a matter of loyalty and allegiance.
In the book of Revelation, commandment keeping in general is referred to as an expression of loyalty. The Sabbath is never mentioned specifically, but anyone who knew how important the Sabbath commandment was, any Bible reader, anyone with an acquaintance with the Jewish worship and belief, would know that the Sabbath commandment would stand out. And so indirectly only the book of Revelation refers to the Sabbath as part of that sign of loyalty, but not separated from the other 9 commandments, and not separated from faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, commandment keeping on its own is not put forward in the book of Revelation, but commandment keeping plus faith in Jesus Christ as the final mark of loyalty.
Jesus said, "If you love me, you'll keep my commandments." The fact that the church has changed God's commandments, in particular the fourth commandment, has been acknowledged for many years. Over a century ago, C.F. Thomas, Cardinal Gibbon's Chancellor, was asked if the church changed the Sabbath. He wrote in reply,
Of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change was her act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters.
The day I choose to keep really determines the God I choose to worship. It becomes an issue of loyalty, of obedience. Our allegiance to Jesus is more important than anything else in life. He invites us to demonstrate that allegiance by a commitment in time each week on the seventh day. In recognition of those who make that decision for Him, God promises a very different final outcome from the fate of those who make their allegiance to the beast power.
And I saw what looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire. And standing beside the sea, those who had been victorious over the beast and over the number of his name. They held harps given them by God, and sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb.
To whom will you pledge your allegiance today?